ladies and gentlemen, welcome back. In this presentation, I want to look at causality and the determination of the turnaround situation. What exactly is going on in this business that we need to rescue or turn around? And if you look at that first slide, you will see that in the past, our thinking was mostly that a business slides from performing well to underperformance, then it lands in distress, and then it becomes a crisis, and eventually it fails under the concept there of dissolution or bankruptcy. The thinking was that it is a slide. What we have found is that this is not really a slide from a green light, a yellow light, red light into a no-go zone type thing. But it is on this continuum that the business is somewhere on this continuum. And there's a point where we must act. And that is referred to as the turnaround situation. So the turnaround situation is like this point in time that we require action, often by the appointment of a turnaround manager. Sometimes it could just be the appointment of new leadership, and it depends, but it is often a complex configuration of things that exist at that point. So what we want to do is to identify or help identify what are the issues of the turnaround situation. Because the turnaround situation will determine the possibility of the strategies that we can pursue. So it is about the turnaround strategies or the rescue strategies. So there are two elements that are crucially important. One is the level of resources. They are referred to as resource munificence. Do we have resources? Can we access resources? Is it scarce or is it abundant? As I've earlier said, that a business that is performing well can also sometimes be in trouble. And then the cause. Where did the problem really originate? Is it an internal problem or is it an external problem? Because those two would require different strategies. Of course, the third one that you can see there in blue is the leadership or the existing management. And we are not going to address that in this presentation. So let me present to you the model that we call the unique precondition matrix. And we look at the two elements. Resource munificence. Do we have resources abundantly available, or do we have a scarcity of resources? And most people think that rescues only happen when you have a scarcity of resources. It is not completely true, as you will see on this presentation. And then where can the problem originate? Is it inside the business or outside the business? And you can see a business that has resources and only have internal or operational problems can be performing well. But eventually, that could also lead to a business that is in financial distress. If there are no resources and the problems are internal, we say that that business is underperforming. And underperformance in future would require, again, different strategies. Alternatively, a business can have resources, it can be going well, but suddenly, and I say suddenly, it might land up in a situation that there is strategic distress. And I will expand on the elements of how to describe that point. The final component is then when a business has no resources and it has really an outside problem that it cannot solve, and that is what we would refer to crisis. So we have those four possible situations. So what we then say is this presentation is about is to look at what are the possible strategies for each of those turnaround situations. And you have to understand this because really it will determine how we go towards the plan further and what we present to the vote. And as you will see, the importance of the vote in the next presentation. Okay, so I'm going to look at the four different ones, but maybe let us just say quickly, what is resource munificence? What we often see is that people just think about resources as financial. And I want to tell you that it is not true. It can be part of capacity, about HR, the resources, the competencies of people, the productivity levels. There are many possibilities. Finance is only one portion. And because it's easily measurable, often we focus on, do you have debt that's not been used? Is there some way to generate cash? Can we sell some of the inventory? Can we restructure the finance? Maybe that's often one of the avenues that the bank will pursue. But that is not enough. So we say that the dependence of the business on the resource slack, do we have it or not, is for us to buy us some time, maybe put in a buffer and access unabsorbed finance or capacity that we haven't used before. And that will determine how seriously or how severe the situation is. If we look at causality, just the two options, we said the business can have a problem with strategies because it doesn't understand whether their problem is operational or strategic or from the external side. We call it internal. So internal problems are self-made, often by poor management. The point is that we have reasonable control over the problems, and we should be able to address them. I often see that rescue practitioners tells me it's an operational problem, it's an easy rescue. When the problem is from outside, external, then it might be much more serious, because there is the point is that we do not really have control over it. So internal problems, efficiency issues, and immediately performance focused. While the external issues are often more to do with, are we in the right business? Must we proceed with this business? The demand for the product is not there anymore. So it's external. It has a serious impact on the demand. So if we go back to our matrix, you will see that underperformance can be described by several elements. That there may be demand, you still have demand for your product. The thing is that you don't make money when you present it to the customers, so you have poor margins. You're not using your capacity, so it increases your costs. The pressure is on keeping your competitive advantage if you might have it. And generally the production or the productivity is low, and you become more cash trapped in that underperformance area. And I just want to compare it with a strategic distress, because here you can see that suddenly you don't make the sales anymore. You might be performing your business well, but you don't make sales. You're losing market share. There are other products on the market. It's out of your control if new products come onto the market. You are losing competitive advantage. So there's a whole change in the demand. People don't want this product anymore. Okay, the competitive products that appear on the market, and suddenly you have lots of inventory which costs you money. They're lying on your shelves. You cannot get rid of it. And you have this concept of strategic distress. And those two are very important ones. When we have a serious case of strategic distress, that would be crisis. Okay? You have rapidly, everything happens just as the same as in strategic distress, but it happens a lot faster. You have dwindling sales again, but rapidly you're losing market share overnight. It's like overnight, you don't have a competitive advantage anymore because there was a complete total change in the demand for your products, and you have a serious cash problem. Just one thing, when we initially did this research, I did it with some people in the banking industry, and they explained to me that often they find that businesses that are performing well, that have good sales, they have market share, they have established demand for their product and competitive advantage, they can also land in a distress situation. And it's often just a cash situation as a result of overtrading, and associated with overtrading then the poor planning that goes with it. So how do we address those? If the business is performing well, we often say that it's fairly easy to use standard strategies to address that problem. So we say that the main strategy there is a sustainability strategy, and you purely need renewal and improvements for that category. When we look at the underperforming businesses says we need to address efficiencies, do our business better, and for that we require a turnaround. Okay? Of course, in a serious case, a rescue. When we look at the strategic distress component, then we are forced. There you don't have a choice. You have to find a new way of doing business. It's a much more serious situation. So we say what you require there is forced repositioning strategies, and that's also for a turnaround. In a crisis, of course, that is very serious, then we would probably need a rescue. And the argument is that the earlier we address, the better we can save businesses in a rescue instead of waiting for the crisis. Often, there will be a combination of elements that we can use. Of course, all strategies are always starting with a cost-driven, as we have seen when we discuss the principles under a turnaround strategy. Okay, so in summary then, we say sustainability strategies can have many elements. And there is an article that will be in your coursework that will explain the detail of those activities and initiatives under the sustainability strategy. Things like pursuing sales, penetrating new markets, seeking new markets, and so forth. Those are the general ones that we would find in most business books anyway on strategy. Efficiency strategies would then entail elements such as protection or strengthening of your competitive advantage, general cost cutting, how can we improve capacities, how can we generate cash, maybe outsourcing. There are many of those initiatives that we can pursue. But once we understand that our problem is one of underperformance, we pursue those efficiency strategies. When we have strategic distress, then we say you have to pursue forced repositioning strategies. And again, we will expand those in the article that is supplied to you. Okay. Here, we often have to revise our strategy completely, pursue something totally new, find new or alternative income streams, maybe access new products by a takeover of a smaller company that give us access. There are several of those options. The main thing here is that you are forced to act because you have no demand for what you have at the moment. So that one key element of do we have a business is not existing. And that's what we then address here. In crisis, of course, there are several ways to pursue that. This is often called the last resort strategy. We do not have many options left, so what can we do? We can do the defensive merger, as we have originally saw. We can divest in this specific business or in this specific unit. We can go for liquidation. And an interesting one is the asking for debt forgiveness, which is like in a compromise, Section 155, associated with that. And then the business may be able to exist further, but the creditors take a fair blow. We always want to move in the direction of rather pursuing sustainable strategies than having any of these other strategies. But those strategies will be targeted to get you back to performing well. What we also see is that some of the initiatives that we can take in the different categories, they are overlapping, and you will even see it over there, that there is always an element of the efficiency strategies that we must apply. You have to curtail the costs. You have to stop the bleeding, even if you are purely in a forced repositioning strategy. Just a last note on this. If we look at that model, you will see that in a recession, when things go bad generally in the environment, all businesses are pushed towards that because people have less money in their pockets, they spend less, there's less demand, and therefore you are pushed into strategic distress or crisis. There's also, of course, the push downwards to not having sufficient resources. So the external environment might push many of the businesses in a specific industry into the strategic distress or crisis mode. Okay, so it's very important, in summary, to say we need to understand what is the turnaround situation. If we cannot understand that, we may apply the wrong strategies, which will then anyway lead to the eventual liquidation. We will then pursue performance in business rescue in much more detail in the next presentation.